everybody. Welcome back to At Home. This is the show where I get a chance to talk to folks about their work, life, and how they find a rhythm between those, especially in lieu of or in light of 2020 and the pandemic and everything we've faced in the last 15 months and counting now at this point. Um, and like I mentioned in the last couple of shows, we're taking a bit of a change in tact with At Home, and I want to talk to folks more now about since we're starting to see more of a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to this pandemic and kind of gaining our lives back. How have all of you found a way to create that rhythm in your own life so that you can stay sane, focus on your family, and work? Hybrid work is becoming the norm now, and all these things have changed in how our lives run with everything that's happened. So it's really interesting for me to get a chance to bring to all of you some sort of tips or tricks or just methods that others have used to create that rhythm for themselves. And I'm super excited to have a really good friend of mine on the show today, Michael Cornwall. Mike, how's it going, buddy?
Good, yourselves?
Pretty good. Well, for the audience, why don't you give a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Michael Cornwall, like Jeff said, and I work for a company called Summit Technology Group. I'm the Renewables Sales Manager for them. So I basically sell and design solar and battery storage systems. Luckily, it was a job that it is very much computer-based unless I'm actually having to go to someone's home to do a site visit. So I have a lot of flexibility within my job to do kind of like what Jeff said and switch and move to a more at-home based environment and atmosphere. Along with that, though, came the idea that at the beginning of this pandemic, we have 3 daughters at home that were also in school and trying to do Zoom meetings, and we don't have a lot of space in our house. So we definitely all had to work together on carving those little niches out for us to be able to do that. And then towards the end of the pandemic, the beginning of this year, actually, we had the birth of our 4th daughter come into life as well. So we also have now 4 daughters, one that is just over 6 months old, plus the older ones, and we're all here just trying to make it work.
First off, congratulations. I know I've said it many times, but congratulations. It's super cool to see your family expanding and you all doing well. So what I'd like to get into with you today is, especially considering you have a large family and your family grew during the pandemic, which I think a lot of folks either can relate to or probably sit back and empathize with, because not only is it challenging to have a larger family or have a family that you need to be present for in general, but when your family grows, and especially in a time like this, I think it'd be really interesting for you to kind of, if you can, share with everyone how you and your family have found at least one way to sort of, create that rhythm between the work you do professionally, the life you all want to lead, spending time with each other, and other hobbies that have nothing to do with work.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was tough for sure when things started out, because it's a lot of people stuck into one relatively small house for how many people we have. Especially my oldest daughter, who's very active, very much a social butterfly. Not being able to go out into the world and see her friends or go to school or have that rhythm and routine was very difficult. And so very early on in the pandemic, my wife and I kind of sat down and said, we're going to take this time to really focus on our family. We're stuck together anyway. We're never going to have another opportunity like this as the kids get older and they all start to go their own separate ways and just want to hang out with their friends more, or they get more involved in activities, ultimately going off to college. There's not going to be a time in our lives where we're all going to be stuck at home together for, at that moment, however long it was going to be, maybe a couple months, maybe longer. It ended up being a year and a half, still to a degree going on. So we just decided that we were going to take the time to really focus on us and our home, and trying to build better relationships for ourselves moving forward, so that as we started to separate a little bit, we still had a very rooted, bonded connection with each other that was always a safe place to come back to. And it made things, I think, much easier throughout the pandemic, because we always kind of had each other to fall back on or talk to or be around. And it was not easy at times either. Having 2 teenage daughters in the house is very chaotic at times, and difficult as they start to get into their hormones and all that kind of stuff. We definitely all had our moments of frustration and difficulties. But for the most part, I would say that we really did come together as a family, and we persevered through the pandemic and the idea of being sheltered in place, and really grew as a core little group. And we got a lot of really fun things done around the house. My wife and my second daughter really got into flowers, and we transformed our whole front yard into like a flower garden at this point, where they've got so many different varietals. I don't even know. I know my favorites are like the zinnias and the cosmos and the dahlias, and then there's a ton more. So it's crazy what they did up front. And they had that opportunity to find something that they like to do together, and had the time to do it because of the pandemic and the idea that everybody was stuck at home. So some cool stuff out of it.
That's awesome. It strikes me as, how interesting, especially for most of our families and yours in particular, how you and your family had already started, if it's okay for me to share this a little bit, I hope. I didn't ask you this in advance. You and your family had started doing things like having some suburban livestock, so chickens and a couple things like that, doing things in your backyard to make it a more, like, I don't want to say entertaining space, but like a living space, like an extension of the house, so that it's another place the family can go and live and enjoy, that isn't just, hey, here's our backyard and we're indoors most of the time. So I remember that you all had kind of started that to some degree beforehand, and it's really interesting to see that you and your wife didn't just keep doing that and do more of it. There was a level of, as you just described, a level of intention behind that. And I find that so interesting, because so many people that I've talked to, and my wife and I are a good example of this, like, we have done some of those things in some capacity, and I think others have too. I really am curious, though, about that level of intention, because you both have always been very sort of cerebral people anyway, and I love that, because when you talk about the things that you are doing, whenever we have, as couples have talked or just friends have talked, you have a lot of nuance behind the reasons why you're doing it. And I'm really curious to find out, if you're willing to share a little bit about, like, what created that, why you wanted to have that level of intention. Like, no, let's sit down and really talk about actively doing this and not just let these things happen organically. Well, how did that play out, and why was that so important to how it's worked for your family?
Yeah, no, and like you said, we were very intentional about kind of the things that we started to do around the property, mostly because, again, we've got 6 people in this house at this point, and it's just over 1,500 square feet. So there's not a lot of space in the house. So we definitely tried to be very intentional around the idea of creating spaces around our property within our limited backyard to a degree as well, that felt like extensions of the home that, either ourselves or the kids could get out into and still feel like they were present in the house and with us as a family, but, had, potentially a separate space that anybody could go to at a given time. And then my wife and I always have, kind of fantasized around the idea of owning, 20 to 40 acres of land at some point, and having like an actual somewhat working farm that we get to work on, and have animals and different things going on there. Definitely very much flowers at this point. And the idea of the flower setup in the front yard was just, it kind of like started as a passion. My wife's always been into that kind of stuff, and she kind of got my oldest daughter sucked into, or not my oldest, but my second daughter sucked into it. And then it became like a thing where they're actually starting more or less a business out of it together to teach her how to start and run her own little business. And they're coming up with a name for it, and they're creating an Instagram page for it. And they're actually selling the flowers right now. So we've sold some bouquets. I know that they're going to do, I believe, some seed propagation, and then be able to sell out seeds of the flowers that they grew, and then hold on to the ones that they really liked from this kind of like experimental first round, and use those to then expand on and grow even more intentionally the flowers that, one, did really well in the front yard for us or for them, and also ones they just really liked growing or thought that were really pretty. And similar to the chickens, it was a matter of trying to be more local and more to a degree ethically sourced. We know what we're giving our chickens, and we have those like backyard fresh eggs that we get to use for the family, which is always really nice as well.
It's so heartwarming to hear not just the description of, your wife and your daughter, growing flowers together, and the basic activity of, you know, parent child, mother daughter doing things together is, it's amazing anyway. It's really cool to see more of that happening in general. I think in this case even more so, how you described, creating this little business of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
I start to think of, like, from a psychology perspective, the sort of the cognitive, bridges that are made between your wife and your daughter, not just in the fact that she's learning how to build a business and how to go through these nuances, but also that it's attaching these positive moments and these learning opportunities with your wife. Like, she's the two things probably cognitively connect together in her mind, so that as she gets older, subconsciously or even just sort of inside, that she will always sort of, I would imagine, always sort of associate those sorts of activities with her mom, and that her mom helped her figure out how to do those things, and they will, abstract out into bigger things over time, which is really cool. And then, like, kind of aside from that, your comments about, like, raising chickens and things like that, it reminds me of, like, Michael Pollan and his comments about, eat whatever you want, just make it yourself,
Mm-hmm.
not buying or consuming so many processed foods from the stores and whatever else. And you and your family taking that even a step further, like, how much of this can we do on our own within reason, and still enjoy it and not make it a chore, but actually make it like something that is integral to the family and enjoyable. I think that's fascinating. I don't know many people. I don't know that many people have really gone down that path, but I have to imagine, I'm very curious, did that sort of shape out organically, or was it one day, again, intentional, like, nope, we're going to do this, and here's exactly all the reasons we're going to do it? Or is it more of, let's give it a shot and see what happens, and it sort of, like, just, snowballed into what you have now?
Yeah, no, it definitely started with, the garden in general, growing our own vegetables. The house that we live in now was actually the house that I grew up in. And so we were able to kind of come back to it and live in it at this point with my kids and raise them here, which is kind of fun. But the property already had, I don't know, I think it's like 13 or 14 fruit trees on it, between apples and pears, a couple cherry trees. So there's already a lot of fruit here. And then my wife and I have always, everywhere we live, we've always been pretty intentional in trying to grow whatever kind of garden, vegetable-esque type stuff that we could. And so that's kind of where it started. And then from there, it kind of branched out to, the idea that she started to look into chickens. And so it was definitely a process. Like, it wasn't something we just jumped into. We had a lot of conversations about how we'd make it work, where we would put the chickens, and ultimately kind of came to the conclusion that, it was going to cost kind of this much money. We already spent, this much money on eggs, and, how can we integrate this into our lifestyle and have something fun for the kids to do and be a part of, but also, again, bring that much more kind of home to our own personal little kind of homestead space.
That's so cool. I love that. Well, Mike, it's been awesome having you on the show. Where can folks find you online?
I'm on Facebook. Obviously, if you're interested in solar or anything like that, you can find us at Summit Technology Group. But that's pretty much it. I know, again, my wife and the daughter have all their kind of things going on. I think if you follow Casita Cornwall, I believe is the handle name for kind of the garden and the family stuff. That could be a spot, but I could always get you links to attach somewhere else for the flower stuff as well later on, but I'm not sure what those are because they're still working on it to a degree.
That's okay. Yeah. And for everyone watching, I'll make sure to put into the notes below in the comment in the description section more information about those handles and where you can find Michael and his family. Mike, thanks you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here. Happy to be on the show, and I love what you're doing. So it's good, and I hope to see you guys again soon.
And thank you all again for tuning in to another episode of At Home. I really appreciate all the guests that I'm able to bring on the show and talk about how they're finding their own rhythm in life right now, especially considering that the pandemic is still going on and there's some scary news that's coming about. But I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's getting bigger every day. And I think if the more we can all talk about those ways that we're finding our own rhythm in life and work and our families, the better off we're going to be, because then we can learn these little lessons from other people that we hear and adjust what we're doing and be more intentional about these things to really enjoy living. So thank you again. If you haven't subscribed already, you can click that down below, hit the big red subscribe button. the little bell there. You can get notifications if you click that for any videos we put out. I keep saying I put out in the future. So just click that little bell. You can get notified. And if you don't mind, give me a thumbs up on the video if you like it. It really does help the algorithm in getting the videos to boost up further into YouTube. Again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a great afternoon.